love of soup. Yes, soup. Because you see, on Christmas Day of 1851 at Santa Fe, Diocese of New Mexico, Father Joseph, a young French priest, prepares a magnificent onion soup for his friend the bishop. Now, after he's tasted and properly appreciated that soup, Bishop Latour says, I am not deprecating your individual talent, Joseph, but when one thinks of it, a soup like this is not the work of one man only. It is the result of a constantly refined tradition. There are nearly 1,000 years of history in this soup. Well, Bishop Latour and Father Joseph, their orders were to subdue and to cultivate a vast, raw, rough, unlettered land where the seeds of the Catholic Church had largely gone wild and blown away in the wind. The fact that they succeeded speaks very highly of their French traditions and manners. It also speaks of their faith. Faith is a gift, one that those two had been given in full measure. Now, Father Joseph's was the childlike, literal belief, but Bishop Latour's was the reason. When he is asked to define a miracle, he says that for him, miracles of the church do not depend so much on faces or voices or healing power coming suddenly from afar off, but upon our perceptions being made finer, so that for a moment our eyes can see, our ears can hear what is there about us always. One sees reality. Some of this is my belief too, although I must tell you I do have a very doubting, very questioning nature. Maybe that's why I joined the Episcopal Church. But I do admire the Catholics. Their ways are so far removed from those of the fire-breathing fundamentalists with nothing on their minds but sin, sin, sin. I'll never forget how disgusted I was as a kid. Moral enthusiasts were all trying to stamp out the evils of dancing. And we were all encouraged to read this awful, awful book. It was called From Ballroom to Hell. Well, I have another Catholic book, and me too. This time it's going to be set in Quebec, old Quebec. That's my next project. Oh, I do have a lot more stories to tell. Lately, though, I will admit to you, I have been feeling rather used up, depleted. The book is so much cremated youth, after all, one's own flesh and blood years. Antonia, Alexandra, the Archbishop. They may have taken the very best stuff out of me. I don't like the view from the top of the hill looking down. Well, I surely did not mean to get into that with you today. I'll just tell you that when the big read is over here in Wyoming, I'll be hopping back aboard the train, heading for New York. I have to find myself a new place to live, after all. And actually, Bank Street was getting pretty noisy. I had to rent the apartment overhead and keep it empty just to eliminate the loud neighbors. So yes, I'll be back on the train again. But that's good. I like trains. Always liked to write about them. When I was very young, about your age, I wrote how smoothly the train runs beyond the Missouri. Even in my sleep, I know when I have crossed the river. The wheels turn as if they were glad to go. They run remembering. They run rejoicing, as if they too were going home. Home, wherever that is. Well, I have been told that as part of my showing up here for the big read, that you might have some questions for me. You might have some ideas about My Antonia. I understand that you've read the book. Have you all read the book?
Some of us have.
Some have and some haven't. Would you have any questions for me? Yes.
What did you do to write My Antonia?
What inspired me to,
What
led me to,
Yeah.
what led me to write My Antonia? Well, of course, I did know Annie Sedgwick as a young girl, although I didn't know her very well until she came to Red Cloud, to town, to work as a hired girl there. But I did notice how fascinated all the young men in town were with Antonia and with some of the other girls who came in from the countryside to work. And I talked to a number of them, and I began to see what a rare person she was and what a fine person. And I thought, most people nowadays in my generation tend to write about things that they possibly don't know very much about. I know I did it, the first novel. My first novel was Alexander's Bridge, and I was writing about wealthy people in Boston, which was really not something that I knew a whole. I knew some Bostonians, but it wasn't what I should have been writing about. And then when I wrote Oh Pioneers, I realized that writing about Nebraska was what I really knew, and I was speaking in my own voice, in my own language. And so I went on with to write. Well, there was Oh Pioneers, then there was Song of the Lark, and then I did want to write about Annie Sedgwick. And I believe you have that discussion guide. There's a picture of her in it, and it's the same picture right here. She was a fascinating person, and a person who really seemed to live maybe a little more deeply than so many of the rest of us. And so I told a friend of mine once, she had a round wooden table in her parlor, and I put a vase of flowers on it, and I said, this is the way I would like to write about Antonia. I'd like people to be able to walk all the way around and see her in all lights and from all angles. And I hope that's what I accomplished when I wrote that book. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you ever written an autobiography?
An autobiography? No, I'm a very private person, and I don't feel that people would be particularly interested in